It's very pretty. It's shiny. Hello and welcome back to another video. Well, the first 6 months of 2024 have fully come and gone, which means that it is time for another mid-year roundup. Last year I made a video just talking about my favourite and least favourite books from the first half of 2023, but I thought this year it might be fun if I took on the mid-year book freakout tag, which has become a little bit of a mainstay on booktube. So without further ado, I've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. So the first question of the tag is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And my answer to that is Rouge by Mona Awad. Obviously. Like Bunny was my favourite book out of all of the books I read last year, so I have pretty high hopes for this one, and this was actually one of the first books I read this year. So yeah, already setting a very high bar. This book is a kind of gothic horror type story about a woman who gets drawn into this mysterious cult while investigating the death of her mother. It draws on topics like beauty and internalized racism and complicated mother-daughter relationships. It's very trippy and you don't necessarily know what is going on most of the time, but the vibes are immaculate and the writing is very fluid, and I loved the way that the main character's descent into madness as she kind of gets drawn further and further into this cult is written. It is such an amazing book. Like, I had high expectations and those expectations were exceeded by far. You should definitely read it. The next question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far in 2024? And to be honest, I pretty much only read standalones. I don't read a lot of series, so my pickings are fairly slim for this question. But I do still have a very good answer, and that is The Temple of Fortuna by Elodie Harper, which is book 3 in the Wolf Den trilogy. Like, even if this had been my only option for this question, it still would have been a fantastic pick because this was a 5-star read. The Wolf Den trilogy follows our main girl Amara, who starts off the trilogy as a slave girl in Pompeii. She is forced to work as a prostitute, and the trilogy follows her kind of gaining herself a little bit of power and status and trying to hold on to that power and status as she's kind of relentlessly pursued by her owner, Felix, who is honestly one of the best, or should I say worst, villains I have ever read in a book. He's just so slimy and sinister and the perfect foil to Amara, who is a fantastically written protagonist. This book actually takes place in AD 79 in Pompeii, and we all know what happened in AD 79 in Pompeii. All I can really say is that this is a thrilling conclusion to an already incredible series. The stakes are really high. I think the ending of the book is really satisfying. Several tears were shed just throughout reading this book on several occasions. It is just an incredible trilogy, and this was the perfect conclusion to it. Next question is, what is a new release you haven't read yet but want to? And I actually have 2 answers for this one. I've got Greta and Valdin by Rebecca K. Riley and Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. Both of these, coincidentally, have recently been shortlisted for the Waterstones debut fiction prize, which is very cool. It makes me want to read them even more. Greta and Valdin is about 2 queer siblings and their family in New Zealand, and Glorious Exploits tells the true story of a group of imprisoned Greek soldiers who performed plays to their Sicilian captors in order to be freed. I've heard really good things about both these books, and they are both on my July TBR pile, but I don't know if I'm gonna be getting to them. I definitely want to read them soon though. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of this year? And boy oh boy am I super excited about this one. My most anticipated release is The End Crowns All by B. Fitzgerald, which, to be honest, might already have been released by the time I upload this video. It comes out on the 18th of July. I put it on my wish list literally as soon as it was announced, and then as soon as the Waterstones exclusive edition with like the sprayed edges and a bit of stenciling on them, as soon as that was announced, I pre-ordered it, literally. It is a sapphic reimagining of the Trojan cycle told in dual perspective by two of my all-time favourite characters from Greek mythology, Cassandra and Helen. I love both of them, so having them be love interests in a retelling of the Trojan cycle is like my dream, and I physically cannot wait to get my hands on a copy. I also read Girl Goddess Queen by B. Fitzgerald a few weeks ago and absolutely adored it, so that has just gotten me even more excited to read her future work. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment of the year so far? And I think I'm gonna ruffle a few feathers when I give my answer, because my biggest disappointment of 2024 so far has been Normal People by Sally Rooney. And I know I hear you gasp, because this is like booktube's and BookTok's like favourite book of all time, and I think that might be why I was so disappointed by it, because the hype was so massive that I was expecting something completely life-changing, and this book wasn't all that. Like, I'm not going to deny that it's very well written, because it is, and I did really enjoy all of the other Sally Rooney books that I've read. Like, I've read all of the other Sally Rooney books that she's published so far. You can watch an entire video where I've reviewed all of them. There was just so much miscommunication in this book, and that is my least favourite trope. So yeah, it just felt quite dull for me. It was just an endless cycle of these two characters not communicating with each other, and that was very frustrating. So yeah, I don't know. I fully respect people who absolutely love this book, but yeah, it wasn't for me. And then on the other hand, what was my biggest surprise, pleasant surprise of the year so far? And that award goes to Hera by Jennifer Saint. This book surprised me because out of the previous books by Jennifer Saint that I've read, that is Electra and Atalanta, I wasn't completely blown away by either of them. I wasn't the biggest fan of Atalanta, and Electra I did enjoy, but I didn't love it. And for a goddess like Hera, who has so much lore attached to her, there are so many myths where she plays a pretty significant role. It's just such a massive undertaking that I was kind of expecting this book to fall short of my expectations a little bit. But thankfully I ended up absolutely loving this book. It is a huge achievement. I think Hera is a really interesting protagonist. You know, she's very morally grey, she does terrible things, but the way that Jennifer Saint has written her, you like fully understand why she behaves the way that she does and why she does the things that she does. This was just a fantastic read, and I absolutely sped through it. I could not put it down. So yeah, overall, Hera by Jennifer Saint far exceeded my expectations and would definitely recommend. Okay, next question is, who is your favourite new author of the year so far, either new to you or new to publishing as a whole? And my pick for this question is Farida Abike-Iyamide. I read both Ace of Spades and Where Sleeping Girls Lie this year and absolutely loved both of them. They are both young adult, dark academia thriller books. Ace of Spades deals with institutionalized racism in education, and Where Sleeping Girls Lie deals with institutionalized sexism and victim blaming. I thought that both of these books handled those pretty serious issues very well, especially because they're both intended for a younger audience who might not be necessarily attuned to such issues. They both have very thrilling plots with a lot of twists, and while both of them are quite chunky books, I did find it very difficult to put both of them down, and I definitely whizzed right through them. You know, even though they're directed towards a younger audience, I would still definitely recommend them to older readers. I still think that they are very entertaining and definitely worth the read.
Me again. I just wanted to add on to this, having now read The End Crowns All by B. Fitzgerald, I now think that B. Fitzgerald is a new favourite author of mine. Like, overall, not just this year, but like ever. She's up there with like Mona Awad and Natalie Haynes. Like, she's only published 2 books so far, and both of them have been top tier for me. Like, Golgotha's Queen was 4.75 star rating, and then The Uncrowned Jewel was a 5-star read for me. It was just like my dream book. It was like B. Fitzgerald pulled my idea of like a perfect retelling out of my head, but also I would never have been able to come up with a book like The Uncrowned Jewel, so all the credit should still go to her. It's just everything from like the characterizations of the mythological characters to using kind of the more niche aspects of the myths. Like, you can tell that so much research has gone into her books, all the way to like the queer representation in her books. Like, I have no notes, nothing. And also I have pre-ordered a copy of Then Things Went Dark, which is her thriller book, which comes out in September. Again, like, that is wild, the fact that in the last year and 3 months, she will have published 3 entire books. Mad. But like, I'm not even a massive like crime thrillery person. I don't read a lot of crime fiction or thriller books, but I am very excited for this one just because B. Fitzgerald has written it. So I will be sat in September when that book comes out. I can't wait. And I'm just looking forward to everything that B. Fitzgerald puts out in the future. I think she is really a writer to watch. I think she's going to be up there in like the canon of Greek retelling writers. Honestly, she is a real talent.
Moving on, who is your newest fictional crush? And I'm probably the worst person to ask this question to because I very rarely get fictional crushes. I feel like my one and only fictional crush is 4 from Divergent, and to be honest, I don't see myself moving on from him anytime soon. It has been over 10 years now, and there has been no one else, so I would say I'm pretty committed. However, I do still have an answer because I feel like Malachi from Honey and Spice by Bola Babalola is just a god tier book boyfriend. He is kind and considerate, and he does grand gestures, and he's labelled as a player, a little bit of an F-boy, but that is literally because he just doesn't know how to talk to women. At least, you know, for the first half of the book. He does eventually get educated, and by the end of the book he is just perfect. I think if I was ever forced to move on from 4, Malachi would be a pretty good rebound. Next question is, who is your newest favourite character? And I think my newest favourite character might be June from the Legend trilogy. She is just a fantastically written protagonist. She starts off the trilogy being completely brainwashed and indoctrinated into a very oppressive system, and she sees nothing wrong with the system that, you know, she benefits directly from. As soon as she witnesses the massive flaws in the system that she is directly supporting, she immediately does a 180 and starts to question said system, and then she spends the rest of the series trying to break that system and put in place a better one. She's just such an awesome badass character, and I really wish I had read this trilogy when I was younger so that I could look up to her growing up, you know? And also, honourable mention for newest favourite character has to go to James from If We Were Villains, because bro deserved better. Next question is, what is a book that made you cry? And I did say that Temple of Fortuna made me shed quite a few tears, but also The Song of Achilles has to have a mention. And, you know, even though I knew the ending, having read this book before and also having studied the Iliad at length, this book still made me cry. There's just something about the writing. It's just so beautiful and yearning and romantic, and it just breaks my heart. On the other hand, what is a book that made me happy? My answer might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but I chose A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which overall is a pretty sad book. There are a lot of terrible things that happen to the characters in this book, and they struggle a lot. However, there's just something about the way that Becky Chambers writes that just gives me such a warm feeling. She writes with such empathy and understanding and just general optimism for the inherent goodness of humanity. It just really warms my heart, and you know, it makes me shed a few tears, but like happy tears, hopeful tears. Next question is, what is the most beautiful book that you have bought so far this year? And my answer would have to be this hefty book. This is a copy of The Marvels by Brian Selznick that I discovered in a donation pile at the back of the charity shop I volunteer at. Like, I walked in at the start of my shift and noticed it, and I was like, hang on a minute, because I had literally watched a TikTok of Jack Edwards talking about this book that morning, so it was like obviously a sign that I had to get it. And also, look at these gold edges. It's honestly so pretty, and it was incredibly heavy to take home with me, but it was so worth it. And I have not read it yet, but yeah, it's very pretty. It's shiny. Just to be clear, I actually have no idea what this book is about. I do know that it is half like illustrations, like half graphic novel, half prose, which is very cool. But yeah, I don't actually know what the plot is, and I pretty much bought this book based on how shiny it is. I judged the book by its cover, and I took it home for £3. And finally, our last question is, what are some books that you need to read by the end of the year? And I actually have a list. I made a list of 24 books that I need to read by the end of 2024, and I think right now I am currently 10 books into that list, so I'm running behind, which isn't great. I need to get a move on. And yeah, out of those 14 remaining books, I just have the closest 3 that I could grab, which was The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki, which I do really want to get to very soon. I'm just slightly intimidated by the size of it, because I've heard really good things. Then I also have After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz, which again sounds super interesting. So yeah, I want to get to it. And then finally, The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which once again I'm very intimidated by. But it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen this year. I'm gonna read it. And that brings us to the end of this list of questions and the end of this video. That was quite a fun little trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. I have tons of plans for the next 6 months of the year. I did say that a good few months ago, and then I went 2 months without posting a video, so fingers crossed that I actually, you know, get to those plans. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Storygraph if you want to see even more bookish content. My username on all of those platforms is @WithLivJones. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!